Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
Okay, so you know how when we think about dieting, it's always like cutting things out?
Oh, yeah, totally. Like carbs or fats or sugar.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're always told to avoid stuff. But what if I told you there's some new research about adding something delicious to your diet?
Now that's interesting. What is it?
Well, we've been looking into some research on mangoes,
Hmm.
and it seems like they might actually have some health benefits.
Really? Mangoes? That's not what I would expect.
I know, right? And it's not just any mangoes. We're talking about specifically fresh mangoes.
Okay, so fresh mangoes, not like dried or processed.
Exactly. We came across this really interesting health news article from March of this year, and it talks about a study that was published in the journal Nutrients.
Nutrients. Okay, that's a pretty reputable journal.
Yeah, it is. And of course, we went straight to the source and got the original scientific paper from January.
So you've done your homework.
Always got to go to the source material. You know how we do it.
Absolutely. So what did you find out about these mangoes?
Well, that's what this whole deep dive is about. We want to understand if adding fresh mangoes to your diet could actually be a simple way to improve your health.
I'm all ears because I'm a little skeptical, I have to admit.
I was too at first, but the science is pretty compelling, especially when it comes to how our bodies process sugar, what scientists call insulin sensitivity.
Okay, so we're talking about blood sugar control and potentially even diabetes prevention.
Right on. So let's get into the details of the study itself. What were the researchers trying to figure out?
So they were looking at adults who are overweight or obese and also had this low-grade inflammation going on.
Low-grade inflammation, what's that?
It's basically like a chronic but mild level of inflammation throughout the body, and it's been linked to a lot of health problems.
I see. So they wanted to see if eating mangoes would affect this inflammation and also how their bodies responded to insulin.
Exactly. It was a pretty targeted study.
And who exactly were these participants?
Well, there were 48 adults in total, ages ranging from 20 to 60. And to be included, they all had to have a body mass index or BMI of 25 or higher.
So that puts them in the overweight or obese category, right?
Correct. And they also had to have elevated levels of something called high sensitivity C-reactive protein.
Whoa, that's a mouthful.
It is, but basically it's a marker in the blood that indicates inflammation.
So it's a way to measure that low-grade inflammation they were interested in.
Exactly. And in terms of demographics, they had a good mix of people from different ethnicities: Caucasian, African American, Hispanic, and Asian.
Oh, that's good to know. Makes the study more representative of the general population.
Yeah, and just to give you an idea of the average participant, they were about 37 years old and had a BMI of around 30.5.
Okay, so we have a pretty good picture of who was involved. Now let's talk about how the study actually worked.
Sure. So it was a 4-week study, and they used a randomized controlled design.
Randomized controlled design, meaning what exactly?
It means they randomly divided the participants into 2 groups. One group ate the mangoes, and the other group didn't. This helps them isolate the effects of the mangoes.
Makes sense. So what did the mango group actually eat?
They had 2 cups of fresh mango every day, which added up to about 100 calories.
2 cups? That's a decent amount of mango.
Yeah, it is. And the control group, they ate the same number of calories, but in the form of Italian ices.
Italian ices, like those sorbet-like things?
Yep, a sweet frozen treat, but no mangoes, obviously.
And I imagine they had to avoid eating other mangoes or similar foods outside of the study.
Absolutely. They were told to avoid mangoes and other foods high in polyphenols.
Poly what now?
Polyphenols, they're these beneficial plant compounds found in lots of fruits and vegetables.
Oh, okay. So they really wanted to control for any other dietary factors that could mess with the results.
Precisely.
So we know who ate what, but what kind of measurements did they actually take during the study?
They did a lot of testing, both at the beginning and the end of the 4 weeks.
Oh, I bet. Give me the rundown.
First off, everyone had to do an oral glucose tolerance test. You know that one where you drink a sugary drink and they track your blood sugar levels?
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one. Not fun.
No, not really. But it's a standard way to see how well your body handles sugar.
Gotcha. So what else?
They also analyzed their blood for various things like glucose, insulin, and those inflammatory markers we talked about, interleukin-6 tumor necrosis factor alpha, and high sensitivity C-reactive protein.
Trying to see if the mangoes had any effect on those inflammation levels.
Exactly. And they also looked at their lipid profiles, which basically tell us about their cholesterol and triglyceride levels.
So a pretty comprehensive look at their metabolic health.
Yeah, and to make things even more interesting, they also looked at the activity of certain genes, specifically nuclear factor, erythroid 2 related factor, to toll-like receptor 2 and toll-like receptor 4.
Whoa, hold on. Those are some seriously complicated names. What are those all about?
I know they're a mouthful, but basically these genes play roles in various cellular processes like inflammation and antioxidant defense.
Okay, so they were trying to see if eating mangoes had any effect on the activity of these genes.
Exactly. They wanted to understand the mechanisms behind any potential benefits.
So after 4 weeks of all this testing, what did they actually find out?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The group that ate the mangoes showed significant improvements in their insulin sensitivity.
So their bodies were getting better at using insulin.
Exactly. They used a measure called the Homeostasis Model Assessment of Insulin Resistance, or HOMA-IR, to assess this.
HOMA-IR.
Yeah, it's basically a score that reflects how much insulin your body needs to produce to keep your blood sugar stable. A lower score is better.
So a lower HOMA-IR means your body is more efficient at using insulin.
Precisely. And at the end of the study, the average HOMA-IR in the mango group was 2.28 compared to 4.67 in the control group.
That's a pretty significant difference.
It is, and it suggests that eating mangoes was actually helping their bodies use insulin more effectively.
That's really promising.
Yeah.
So was that the only positive finding?
No, there's more. They also saw improvements in the function of beta cells in the pancreas.
Now remind me, what do beta cells do again?
They're the cells responsible for producing and releasing insulin.
Right, of course. So how do they measure beta cell function?
They use something called the disposition index, which basically tells us how well the beta cells are responding to changes in blood sugar.
And what did they find?
The mango group showed a much better disposition index compared to the control group, an average of 2.76 versus 5.37.
So again, the mango group was doing better.
Yes, their beta cells were functioning more efficiently, which is a good thing for blood sugar control.
Okay, so we've got improved insulin sensitivity and better beta cell function. Any other notable changes?
Yes. Actually, they found that after the 4 weeks, the mango group had significantly lower levels of insulin in their blood during that oral glucose tolerance test.
Meaning they needed less insulin to control their blood sugar.
Exactly. The Italian ice group didn't show this improvement, so it seems like the mangoes were making a real difference.
That's pretty impressive, all from eating mangoes.
Right. But there's one thing that they didn't find, which was a little surprising.
What's that?
They didn't see any significant changes in those inflammatory markers. We talked about interleukin, 6 tumor necrosis factor alpha, and high sensitivity C-reactive protein.
Well, that's interesting because I thought mangoes were supposed to be anti-inflammatory.
Yeah, some previous research has suggested that, but in this study, they didn't find any significant effects.
I wonder why.
They actually addressed this in the paper. They suggested that maybe because the study was conducted during the COVID-19 pandemic, there might have been other factors influencing inflammation levels.
Yeah, that makes sense. The pandemic definitely threw a wrench into a lot of things.
For sure.
Okay, so no changes in inflammation. But what about their weight? Did anyone lose or gain weight?
This is another interesting finding. The people in the mango group, their body composition remained stable over the 4 weeks.
So no weight gain, even though they were eating 2 cups of mango every day.
Exactly. And surprisingly, the control group, they actually had a slight but significant increase in body weight.
Really? The Italian ice group gained weight?
Yep. On average, they gained about 0.87 kilograms.
Huh. That's interesting. I guess it goes to show that not all calories are created equal.
Right. And it also challenges the idea that mangoes being sweet will automatically make you gain weight.
Totally bust that myth.
And just to complete the picture, they also looked at cholesterol and triglyceride levels, and they didn't find any significant differences between the groups.
Okay, so no major changes in those areas, but what about those genes they were monitoring?
Yes. The genes, well, they found a 2-fold increase in the activity of the nuclear factor erythroid 2 related factor, 2 gene in the mango group.
2-fold, that sounds like a lot.
It is, but in this study, it wasn't statistically significant.
What does that mean exactly?
It basically means that the increase they saw could have been due to chance. It wasn't strong enough to say for sure that it was caused by the mangoes.
So it's a hint of something interesting, but they need more research to confirm it.
Exactly. But it does suggest a possible mechanism for how mangoes might be exerting their benefits.
How so?
Well, this particular gene nuclear factor, erythroid 2, related factor 2, is really important for protecting cells from damage.
So it's like a cellular bodyguard.
Exactly. And the fact that it was more active in the mango group suggests that maybe mangoes are boosting antioxidant defenses in the body.
And that could be contributing to the improvements in insulin sensitivity.
It's definitely a possibility that needs further investigation.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. What are the big takeaways for our listeners? What does all this research actually mean for people in the real world?
I think the most important takeaway is that simply adding fresh mangoes to your diet could have a real positive impact on your metabolic health, especially if you're overweight or obese and have some of that low-grade inflammation we talked about.
And specifically, it could help improve how your body uses insulin, which is crucial for preventing type 2 diabetes.
Absolutely, and we can't forget the fact that they saw these improvements without any weight gain in the mango group. That's huge.
It really is, because a lot of people are afraid to eat fruit, especially mangoes, because they think it will make them gain weight.
Right, but this study suggests that's not necessarily the case.
And you mentioned earlier that type 2 diabetes is linked to heart health. So improving insulin sensitivity could also have benefits for your heart.
Exactly, it's all interconnected.
Now, we talked about some limitations of the study, so it's important to acknowledge those as well.
Of course. So, first of all, they didn't see any significant changes in those inflammatory markers, which was unexpected.
And they speculated that the COVID-19 pandemic might have played a role in that?
Yes, it's hard to control for everything in a real-world setting.
For sure. What other limitations did they mention?
Well, the increase in the activity of that nuclear factor, erythroid 2 related factor, 2 gene, while promising, wasn't statistically significant.
So they need to do more research with a larger sample size
Yeah.
to confirm that finding.
Exactly. And finally, they acknowledge that we still don't fully understand all the mechanisms by which mangoes might be improving insulin sensitivity.
So more research is needed to unravel the mysteries of the mango.
Exactly.
But overall, it seems like pretty promising research.
I agree. It definitely warrants further investigation.
So we always like to get the expert opinions. What did the researchers themselves have to say about their findings?
Well, Dr. Indika Ederising, one of the lead authors, emphasized that managing blood sugar isn't just about the numbers. It's about improving insulin sensitivity.
So it's about how your body responds to sugar, not just how much sugar is in your blood.
Precisely. And he went on to say that this research suggests that mangoes could be a simple and enjoyable way to support better insulin function.
Which could then lower the risk of developing type 2 diabetes.
Right. And he was also really excited about the fact that they saw these improvements without any weight gain.
Yeah, he actually said that he believes this finding challenges the common misconceptions about mangoes and their role in weight management.
Exactly. He thinks it could help people see mangoes in a new light.
As a healthy and delicious part of a balanced diet.
Precisely.
Okay, so this has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of mangoes and metabolic health. What's the bottom line for our listeners?
I'd say if you're overweight or obese and looking for ways to improve your insulin sensitivity, adding 2 cups of fresh mango to your daily diet could be a good strategy to discuss with your doctor or a registered dietitian.
Always good to get personalized advice from a healthcare professional.
Absolutely. They can help you determine if it's right for you.
And on that note, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought. Sometimes even small changes to our diet can have a big impact on our health.
It's true. We often underestimate the power of food.
So I encourage everyone to be curious about the science behind food and wellness and to explore different ways to nourish your body.
It's an ongoing journey of discovery.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe the humble mango will become your new secret weapon for better health.
It could be a delicious and surprisingly effective addition to your daily routine.
Well, that's it for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Until then, stay curious and keep exploring.
And don't forget to eat your mangoes.
Fresh ones, of course.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.